of the United States of America
and to
and
the
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning. All right. Roll call.
Mr. Ramos?
Here.
Mr. Lindemann?
Here.
Mr. Sabal?
Here.
Dr. Gomez?
Here.
Mr. Perrine?
Here. Members of the board, if we follow the same protocol we have before, we're only going to need 3 motions this morning because we have 3 items for action. And if we follow that same procedure, if you want to make the motion, if you first identify yourself, that way you have the floor, then make the motion, and hopefully things will run smoothly. I think we've worked out some of the kinks of the problems we had with the phone last time, Alma?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're ready to go, and hopefully everybody can hear. This morning, we're here to address the new executive order issued by the governor related to the virus. And in looking at the executive order, it's at least broken up into 3 components. The first one's instruction and opening. The second one deals with safety and procedures and precautions that have to be taken. And the third one is, which is very important, regarding support and employment. And we'll get into all of those individually. But first, let me say that these are some trying times. Regardless of what we do, we're going to have situations that are definitely going to be unforeseen and are going to complicate very much the issue. Those of you that follow sports will note that the Marlins, I believe, they tried with all the precautions that they took and all the precautions that they're taking, that they ended up with 12 or 19 cases. And it appears now, with all of what they're doing, and that's baseball, and they're all very remotely removed from one another. And if you can imagine, we try to put kids in a classroom with teachers, what that situation is going to be like, regardless of all the precautions that we're going to take. So anyway, that by way of a little bit of background, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Samaniego, and we're going to specifically discuss all of the information given us and the edicts given us by the governor, which he virtually did was punt to the local districts. And the demographics and all of the circumstances are going to be different in the different districts because of their location and the circumstances that are prevalent in each individual community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Samaniego.
Good morning, Mr. President, board members, members of our staff and community that are watching out there. As Mr. Perrine explained, last week on Thursday, the governor came out with a new executive order in order to provide more guidance to school districts across Arizona. And the information was shared by both Superintendent Hoffman and the governor. So the executive order is Executive Order 2020-51. And under the executive order, not much changed other than a few very key important items that affect school districts. The first one being that the former executive order had stipulated that school districts could not begin their face-to-face instruction until August 17th. With this new executive order, as Mr. Perrine explained, there is no longer a start date as provided by the governor for face-to-face instruction. So the authority has been pretty much left up to the school districts to make that determination when the school district will be able to go back to a face-to-face instruction, and that potentially for us may be, would be that hybrid model that was already approved. And you all understand that the hybrid model, even with that, is still face-to-face instruction along with distance learning 3 days out of the week. That hybrid model would allow us to reduce the number of students on our campuses. So with that being said, under the executive order, local school districts would be taking guidance from local health department, state health department, and on these health benchmarks that they would be providing to us in order to tell us whether they feel that our schools within our communities are safe to return to that face-to-face instruction. So that was a major change. The August the 17th, sort of forcing school districts to open up their plants is now up to the school districts guided by the health department. So what that means as far as instruction is that schools may begin online instruction. And most of the districts across Arizona, I think, have opted for that online instruction. So we will begin August 17th as planned. Our students will start their first day of school August 17th, bright and early, following the same timeframes as provided last year. So for example, school will start at 8 a.m. For high school, they have two sets of groups, AM and PM. So Douglas High School is already going through the registration process and informing the parents of what that schedule looks like. While middle school and elementary are following an A and B schedule. School starts at 8 o'clock and ends at 2:30 p.m. What that doesn't mean is that teachers or the students will be in front of a computer for all those hours straight through without any breaks. Distance learning will follow both a synchronized and an asynchronized model of teaching, which means synchronized means that there is some live interaction with the teacher and the student via Google Classroom, and so it is virtual. And asynchronized, meaning that there will be assignments that are going to be provided online, and students have the responsibility to log in to complete those assignments, but it doesn't mean that the teacher will be virtually present during the asynchronized learning. So synchronized and asynchronized learning is what all of our district platforms will look like. The other main thing, so we know that's August the 17th is the start date. Attendance is mandatory. Student attendance will be required on a daily basis and be taken in various ways that will be provided in our distance learning platform. From checking in and logging into your Google Classrooms, completing assignments, whether it be via paper or Google Classroom, student and parent attestation forms. So we have various different ways that attendance will be taken. Grades will be provided to students, so it is an expectation that parents ensure that their children are following the assignment guidelines and turning in their assignments because of a grade being offered at the end of the quarter. Now, another change or more clarification on our employees, as previously discussed by Mr. Bahrain, is that we may continue to pay staff during a school closure as long as staff is committed to be available for work. Now, that's very specifically written in the executive order, and I'm going to read it word for word as it is in here because I think that is important and something that we will be discussing a little bit further. But
before you get into that, let's before we get in, that's a completely different subject. Let's do go back and recap with the information you just gave us. Questions. First of all, are the teachers going to have the option of being at home, or are they going to have the option of being in the classroom? In other words, those that choose not to come to the building, can they stay at home and do what some of them did last time, or are they all going to be required to do the same thing? Is it optional at home or in the building?
Okay, so as far as staff is concerned, we have, I've gotten input from all of our administrators, and at this point, we, teachers have all the necessary tools in order to be successful in distance learning teaching at the school site. So the requirement will be that staff report to work on site, and that is for support staff and teachers as well, to complete their duties on site. Very specific guidelines and safety protocols will be in place at the school sites. Now, I did get legal advice on this from two attorneys that work with our district, and under the guidance and under the executive order, it does say during school closure. Okay, so the school closure, meaning that if there was ever any opportunity or ever any another time where the governor would close down our schools like he did back in the spring, then that's what that piece of the executive order means. We are not closed right now. Okay, we are fully open and functioning. So the expectation is that yes, staff would need to report to work to complete their assignments. Now, obviously.
Wait, but before you go on,
Okay.
let's be clear about that,
Okay.
because I think somewhere along the line, it's been discussed at length, and there's been a lot of input regarding that. So you're saying that there is no option that all teachers will report to work, and what about the ones that say, I can't, for whatever the reason, their fear or their apprehension or whatever the case might be? What are you going to do about
Okay.
those that say, I'm not coming to work? Then you're going to be dealing with saying, well, if you want to stay home, then here are your options: sick leave, or we deal with you. And so this has to be very, very clear, because this is a point of contention. And
It
I
is.
don't know if the board members have any opinions on that or not, but I think you need to clarify that, because if a teacher calls and says, I'm not going, if for all the reasons that I don't want to tell you, and the main one being fear for being in that classroom, what are you going to do about
Okay.
that?
So we've already been addressing that, and as always, I've said that this year is going to be a year of flexibility. So while the expectation is that staff do report to work, we are going to have those situations where staff either has, number one, an underlying health condition that prevents them from being able to report to work and doing their work on site, or that there is an underlying concern of being in contact with COVID. So in those cases, we're going to take those cases individually, case by case, and we have already addressed it with our attorneys, and we will have to, or Mrs. Cox will have to complete what we call an ADA interactive meeting, which in this meeting, we will identify whether the situation merits, is it FMLA? Is it EMLA? Is it a leave of absence? Is it that it is an overwhelming concern just of being on site? Because we know that teachers with at least a computer can fulfill their duties, from home. They did it, back in the school closure, except that this time around, the teaching we know has to be more inclusive, more synchronized, so that there is a better success. The interactive process would identify the situations being brought forth by each individual employee. As Denise and I spent some time yesterday just emailing back and forth between our attorneys, and lots of questions on the attorney side to determine whether the employee does have an underlying condition that they need to provide us with some kind of doctor documentation. If it is just an overwhelming concern of their safety, then I as a superintendent, or we as a district, have to then have those options. Will we allow employees to work from home based on the fear of being contacted with COVID? I think so. We're going to have to. I'm not opposed to having that option. But what I want to make sure, Mr. Bahrain, is that we go out today with the expectation is that, yes, we're going to come to work, but if an employee reaches out to their principal, or to, in this case, to Mrs. Cox, because it has to go through HR, that we're going to take each case on its own and give it the importance and the significance that it needs to be, so that we can make a decision whether that employee will be able to work from home. So that option, on a case-by-case basis, is there. All of our administrators feel that while they are overly concerned as well of having the staff there, is that in order for teachers to be successful this year and get the support services that they need, that they're going to be provided that support if they are on site, as opposed to, being at home. Our teachers have all the technology in the world in their classrooms, and so what we're asking is that if once everybody gets back, that they continue that social distancing even in the classroom. So again, to answer your question, yes, we will take a situation one at a time, case by case, and if the individual reaches out, we will really address it and have an interactive process meeting to determine what the situation and how we're going to handle that situation, because I will tell you that there is not one situation that is the same.
This could be an administrative nightmare.
Yes, it could be.
And how many certified teachers do you have?
We have about 250 around there.
All right. Notwithstanding the mitigating circumstances, that they have to go through the doctor, FMLA, some disability or whatever. You've got, and we'll talk about the classified in a minute.
Yes.
Because you've got your IAs, you've got the secretarial staff, you got clerical staff. If they don't fall under one of those mitigating circumstances, and they just say, I'm not coming to work because I don't have any one of I don't fit the criteria of what you're saying, I'm not coming to work. This is important, because I
Yes, it
think
is.
you're going to end up with the first day of school, or as things progress here, I'd hate to see any type of action taken against any teacher that decided for their own well-being and welfare that they didn't want to go to work and have this trauma about being in a classroom. And I know that the students won't be there, but just interacting with the rest of them. And so how are you going to address the person that just says, I am not going because I'm fearful? And you say, well, do you fit the criteria? And they say, no, but I'm not going, I'm fearful. How are you going to handle that?
The way we're going to handle it is obviously a collaborative approach, because alongside the administrator, the employee, and HR. Now, it is going to be very challenging, I will tell you, because let's just say a support staff member, okay, that's considered an essential employee to the functions of a school, such as, I'm going to use a school secretary, for example. So a school secretary who may be one of the most key employees to the functions of that school and the operations of the office, who may feel that they can't go to work because they are in fear, it is taking the position into consideration. What are the duties of that job, and could those duties be performed at school? Under attorney guidance, she said, we have to decide whether, one, will we allow employees to be able to remotely work from home, okay? And under that guidance, if we are having that option, which I think we need to be open and have that option, again, not a free-for-all kind of thing where employees would just take it upon themselves, but there needs to be a procedure, which we will have in place and written and shared with the staff, that if that is the case, we will look at their position, at the essential duties and functions of that job, and see what opportunity for working from home would look like. But an essential employee is going to be very difficult, such as a school secretary, for example.
Well, but, let's not complicate that, if you don't mind, because they're different. Classified and certified are different.
I'm just saying as an example.
And the requirements of the certified is completely different. And we're going to discuss the classified in a minute, because there's one portion, as I mentioned earlier, that they discuss the support and
Yes.
and continued employment.
Okay.
But
So certified teachers, yes. Obviously, we know that teachers are in a different group of employees. They are properly certified, and they could teach from home. You know, if need be, if they had a computer, if they had their camera, and they had that option. So that's why I'm saying, if an employee, I want to make it very clear, if an employee has an underlying situation, health situation, or over concern about their welfare and returning to school, they need to report that to their administrator and HR, so that we can make a decision together to allow them to fulfill their job duties, whether it be at home or on site, and we will have that flexibility.
did you consider, and then I'm going to open it up to the board, because I'm sure they have a lot of questions and comments. Did you consider having it optional, and would that just be impossible to put into effect? That
I
teachers
can.
optional at home or optional at business?
And I'm definitely open to that. The administrative team, as obviously I've took a lot of input from them, overwhelmingly feels that, you know, in order to be successful, they should be on site. But I don't think any administrator or myself would be opposed to that option, and we can definitely leave it optional.
Because if you made it optional,
Yeah.
then you wouldn't have to go into that realm
For
of
teachers,
justifying whether they were sick and it was FMLA or anything like that. And then they would feel comfortable, and the only thing that would come into play would be sick leave or any other type of leave. But to me, members of the board, if we made it optional, then they don't have to deal with, were you sick or are you afraid? And because that shouldn't come into play at all. Because if they decide to report to their building site, then they're there doing it willingly. But if they don't want to, then they have the ability to
do their
teach
teaching
at
from
school.
home,
All right,
from
members
school.
of the board, let's open it up just
Yeah.
on that, because we got a lot of discussion.
And that is for certified. I want to clarify,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
certified employees, or in this case, are teaching, certified employees.
Yeah, we'll get to
And
the classified in a
Yes,
minute.
and I am not opposed to that. Again, we need to be as flexible. These are very uncharted, waters and times, and there is an overwhelming concern. And I will tell you, as a former HR, and now Mrs. Cox being in that position, we've already had situations that we're dealing with right now, both in certified and classified, that we're addressing, and could be a royal nightmare.
But see, it would preclude your having to have them line up out there in front with HR, with doctors this, and you having hearings and having this. Optional would mean you stay at home if you want, and of course, I don't want to beat that horse to death. Dr. Gomes, do you have any questions or?
Take the one from the.
Who?
The only thing that I would like, if this is an option, okay, if we do go with an option for teachers, is that we stipulate that from August the 4th, and this is, I know that other districts are doing this, okay? So from August the 4th, which is their first date back, to the, I believe it's the 10th, those are a week, there's 8 days of major training involved for PPE equipment, for trauma-informed, for staff meetings and all of that. And a lot of districts who are having that option of working from, which is very few, working from home, is that the teachers do attend those 8 days of training, because it's crucial to everything that it will be taking place for the school year. And then they can, you know, starting on the 17th, we can provide that option.
Okay,
We
members of the
definitely can
board,
do that.
Just about that one item, Dr. Gomez, do you have any reaction to that?
Yes, I do. Okay,
Pull the mic down to you.
yeah, is it on?
Should be.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, there it is, okay. So anyway, I have two major concerns, really big concerns. And if we vote to give them the option, that's fine. But the thing of it is to have fear is one thing. Inordinate fear is another thing. So you mean to tell me, if a teacher says to HR, I'm too afraid, I don't want to go to teach, I don't want to go to school. Well, the way we're going to start school is there's not going to be any students in the classroom. They're going to be by themselves. They might see somebody when they get there, but they can social distance. So is that really a concern to the teacher? She would be more in contact with people if she went to Walmart. You know, I mean, that fear to me makes no sense. Makes no sense to say, I am fearful. You know,
Of going to work.
you get what I'm trying to say? In other words, they're not going to be in contact with anybody. The way we're going to start the school year, there's no contact. I am afraid, I'm truly, truly afraid that the instruction that we're going to have, especially if you had it from home, is going to be negligible. The student, especially the poor student, and the student has difficulty getting onto the internet and stuff like that, will have no instruction. Because the teachers are not going to be doing presentations that the child can look at. There's not going to be any instruction. So I don't think that that item is valid to say, I'm too fearful to go. Because that person is not going to be staying in their house 24/7. That person is going to be interacting with somebody during the day. Whether it be relatives, whether it would be extended family, or stuff like that. So I am really, really opposed to this option of, that they can
Providing
stay
an
home or
option.
not.
The thing is, just for discussion, is regardless of what the extenuating circumstances are, if they're going to stay home and we say everybody comes to work and we don't have this option, that's why we're discussing it, then those that are fearful are going to find some way to get some valid excuse. And God only knows how many there's going to be that will say, I'm not going regardless. I don't want to be around anybody. I'm safe with my family. I'm safe within the environs of my house. But I'm not going to that building with all of those people there regardless. So this is just for discussion. So then they would have to go through all of those options that are available to them as to get a valid excuse. Then if they do, is it going to be sick leave, or is it going to be the option to let them instruct from home? And that's why we're having this discussion, because you've got to play out all of those potential
Yes.
circumstances that are going to happen. So let's hear from Mr. Lindeman.
Good morning. This is Mr. Lindeman. I'm thinking that the option is a good way to move, except I don't think that there would be many people to take advantage of that, I would hope. And so at least that can be still on the table. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sabal?
I have no comment.
What did you say?
No comment.
No comment. How about you, Mr. Ramos?
Yes, I have, what I say, I feel comfortable with having the option for teachers to decide whether they want to go on site or they're staying at home. But I also have a question for Superintendent Samaniego. Should a teacher that's on site or at home or whatever have a situation where they cannot perform their duties for 2 or 3 or 4 days or a week, how are they going to be substituted? Do you have something already in line for that emergency or something like that?
You bring up a very good question that I have been thinking a lot about, and we have not yet discussed that part with the admin team, but I have within my own team, leadership team. So we know that distance learning is indeed going to be difficult. So what we've done in the past is when a teacher has been absent, right, is we have subs that come in and take the role of a teacher. They leave a lesson plan and then they teach for that day. What I addressed in a staff communication earlier today is exactly this point. is that during this online teaching, getting subs is going to be very difficult. And we know that potentially whether it is online or let's say when we are able to go back into our hybrid model of teaching, we know that a sub coming in and taking the role of a teacher for that day, let's say it's right, let's just say, let's utilize online right now. So a teacher is out, okay, they're out sick for whatever reason. So if it's their A day of teaching, a sub called in really is not going to be able to perform the duties because they need to know the technology and they need to know to be able to go into Google Classroom to do all their teaching. So what I foresee happening, and that will be part of our plan, is that when a teacher is absent, they're not going to be able to synchronize the learning that day. In other words, they're not going to be able to be physically there virtually teaching the class. So what's going to have to happen is that they're going to have to leave their assignments that day online for students to be able to go in and do their assignments. That way we eliminate the need of a sub, because why do I need a sub? A sub is not going to be there to work with children. Now, when we are able to get back to hybrid, then that's a different story. If it is on the, we know that the hybrid, there's going to be kids coming to school 5 days a week, physically, half of the students. So when we're able to go back to hybrid, then most certainly we'll be utilizing subs. But right now, Mr. Ramos, there is no need for a sub. Teachers who are absent and for whatever reason, and they report their absence, they're going to be able to still do their online teaching from wherever they're at. They can upload assignments and students will be able to know, hey, for today, I will not be present virtually, but your assignments are on there, they're due on this, follow the directions. So that's going to be the nice thing about the online teaching portion. The portion is that we're not going to need subs at all.
Of course, if
Yes, Mrs. But I would just like to add that say physically, they can no longer perform their duties, and because they're ill, say not from COVID, but any other
any other
illness or circumstances. Yes, then what's going to happen?
Right now, they're going to report their absence, okay, but they're going to leave their lesson plan. Let's say their lesson plan and their instruction would have already been preset in their Google Classroom. So they're not going to need to worry about, because the students will have access to their learning online. Does that make sense? So if
Yes, okay.
if I'm absent because I have a doctor appointment, for example, and it's Monday, I will be able to do all my pre-teaching, my assignments, uploading everything into my Google Classroom, that my physical virtual interaction with the kids will not be needed because my students will be able to access all the assignments virtually.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members of the board, any other comments on that? Now, we know that that if the optional is approved, we know it's not going to be optimal. We know that's not the best instruction in the world. But in these times, we're having to deal with the best we can. Now, let's say the board did give you the authority to go either way, right? And you deal with those teachers instead of, if it was optional, then you don't have to deal with them bringing in all these excuses and all of the things that would accentuate their not being able to come to the class, right? What kind of a logistics nightmare is that going to create for you if you have some staying at home and some in the building?
Well, I mean, the nightmare would be definitely for, of course, the school administrators. But I think because of the remote teaching and everything being done online, you don't have the many difficulties that we would have when it's regular teaching brick and mortar when staff is not present because you have kids. So I don't foresee a lot of issues, but I do agree with Dr. Ed, and we know that this is not the best case scenario, because when, we know that teachers and the teaching needs to be top-notch. This year, we have a lot of parents asking for the instruction to be improved this time around. So teachers will be more successful because they have all the tools they need at site. We can all agree on that. We can all agree that there are some staff that probably have more fear than others, but we are going to be, every teacher is going to be in their independent classrooms and as much social distancing as provided. And so part of my part of the work that we would need to do in case there is an option is I would still develop some kind of a form so that we have it in writing as to the, just name, reason, what school, and a brief explanation, and then we just have something on file so that we know who's at home and who is on site. I would still develop something internally.
Okay, is there anything else you want to add to that before we go into the classified aspect of it?
We do, because we're talking about this, we do have one request to address, and it is specifically
Go
on this
ahead.
topic.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is from Blaze Cross, 2127 Douglas, Arizona. Number one, option for teachers and staff that work in DUSD to bring children to work and isolate themselves in classrooms instead of having children sit in another classroom or a learning space or cafeteria with a staff member. If it would be more beneficial and safe for them to remain with their parents. Number two, we received an email from DHS administration stating that teachers are to report on August 4th at 7:30 a.m. to the auditorium with a cloth face mask, and temperature checks are to be taken. Concern is that the number of staff required to attend this meeting in the auditorium exceeds the 50 people, which is the maximum number established by Governor Ducey's executive order. Would feel better if there were other options of reporting, such as maybe a football field or maybe virtually from our classrooms. Truly concerned for safety of staff and students. So that's the only one comment that we got on that.
Okay.
So, so that would totally be for teachers. And I will say, Dr. Ed, and kind of going off of what Mr. Lindeman said, just to give you an idea, I mean, teachers know that they were going to be reporting to work on August the 4th. That's next week. Out of certified staff, I've only received one person that has concerns of returning to work because of health underlying issues that are pre-existing already, and we've dealt with this, her concerns before. So out of all our 250 teachers, at this point, I've had one teacher requesting to be able to work from home because of that underlying. So that kind of gives me, now, of course, we hadn't discussed the option, right? Which may cause more staff to reach out to their administrators to say, I don't feel comfortable. But if that is an option, I think we still develop and create a form internally that will allow us to have the reason behind and some kind of acknowledgement form received by their administrators.
Okay, well, good. That,
Okay.
that piece of information
Uh-huh.
is very important. So then you would entertain administratively that if someone had a very, very valid reason for whatever the case might be, without having to get into all of the other.
FMLA and.
Right, then you would consider that?
Yes.
Okay. So, members of the board, we'll wrap up that part of the executive order unless you have any other comments or questions. All right, and then we'll come back and we'll entertain a motion to approve whatever your recommendation is if the board goes along with it.
Yep.
The other thing too is that we talked about the classified. And we've said right from the outset that we had no intentions at all, and the board was unanimous in this feeling that unless we had some very, very dire circumstances, that everybody is going to keep their job. The governor was very explicit in saying that the district can keep people that are non-essential to the instructional environment if the district could justify giving them something to do under extraordinary circumstances because their duties were directly related to something that couldn't be effectuated because of the virus. So now we're looking at several positions in the district that become unessential because there's just not going to be the impetus for them to have anything to do. So it does say that if we, and let me just read the exact language. It says that the benefit of the state, it says as a direct benefit of the state, its public schools, and the Arizona families, and in furtherance of the public purpose of ensuring that properly trained, qualified, and experienced personnel continue to be available in person, classes resume. Arizona's public schools may continue to pay their employees or classes of employees, including hourly employees, during periods of school building closure, so long as the public school determines that such payments are necessary to preserve a properly trained, qualified, and experienced workforce. It serves the public purpose of protecting the public school's investment and its workforce, and the public school has sufficient revenues to continue such payments due to school building closures as determined by the governing boards of each public school. To be eligible for payment, the employee remains committed and available during work hours or periods of school building closures, whether the work is to be performed in person or remotely, or the employee is given an alternative work assignment for which they are qualified to perform. That says that if the district and the employee is willing to take on any other duties and responsibilities not necessarily directly associated with their original employment, that if the district finds a place for them and they're willing to do it, now that gets to the question of the secretary that you mentioned a while ago, that if she says, I'm not coming to work, then there's really no option for her because she can't work and do her duties that would be expected in that building at that time. So the point being that anybody that's willing to take an alternative, as mentioned in the order, an alternative duty or responsibility, then they can stay if the district feels that it's something that can benefit the district. If they don't want to do it, then they know what the alternative is, all right? So I want to make sure we understand that. So what do you plan to do regarding that with those people that would be directly affected by that part of the order?
Okay. Well, we know that the support staff that directly works with the instruction as support in the schools involves IAs, involves school security staff, to some degree, the bus drivers who are directly involved with students, and special ed IAs, gen ed IAs, I mentioned those, and any school support staff that is involved in the day-to-day actions of the school.
What about
So-
food service?
And the food service, yes, food service. So what we have discussed is, number one, let's talk about food service. Food service is going to continue. We need to provide food. So all of our 8 campuses are going to be running in the operations of our food service program. Breakfast and lunch. So the staff will be employed and will be working. Second, food service has to also feed the kids that are showing up for the free on-site learning 5 days a week. So they're going to be preparing meals for the kids in school, and they're going to be preparing meals for those that are at home and parents and families come and pick up. The third option that we're looking at for food service is utilizing our bus drivers and our buses to go out into some areas around our surrounding communities that we can deliver meals. A lot of districts did this over the school closure. We didn't because we felt we could handle it, but this time around, just to be able to reach out to more families, then we would utilize the bus drivers and some potential bus locations or drop-off locations where we would do the breakfast and lunch service as well. So our food service employees are being taken care of, and they will be working. There's going to be a lot of work, adjustment of hours, and staggering their employees to make it happen. Food service employees, we have 3-hour employees, we have 4-hour employees, we have 5-hour employees, we have full-time employees. And so Mr. Pineda and Mr. Valdez are really working hard at adjusting times and making sure that they don't go over their time and are only utilized in the areas that they need. So it's going to take a lot of managing with the 40-some employees that they have. So I'm not concerned about food service. Our bus drivers is another group of employees that obviously will not be needing to take that many kids. Based on just the information that I had from last week on the students that have chosen to go to school 5 days a week, there's very few that are going to be requesting the bus services. And so we may be doing like 2 bus runs or something like that just on the number of kids. So obviously all the bus drivers won't be driving a bus, but some of those bus drivers will be delivering meals, like I said, will be then providing that transportation for those kids that need it. And in addition to, we'll have very specific assigned roles to fulfill the needs of the district in other capacities. It could be part of maintenance. It could be part of security. A lot of work right now has been done by the bus drivers, and I will say, thank you to our transportation department. They've been really involved over the school closure time in the summer in painting of our schools, assisting maintenance, moving furniture. So they've been busy. So they will have an additional specific role that we're going to sit down with Mr. Rodriguez and his department to try to clarify that what their roles will be and specific duties, because everybody within a classified staff role will have, in order to continue getting paid, will be provided an opportunity to fulfill another role. And like Mr. Bahrain says, as long as they are committed to do the work that they've been assigned to, they will get pay. It is not the intention of this district to furlough. We don't want to lay off people, but we know that in order to continue to have them paid, they need to commit to the work that is going to be assigned. Because if we don't have 4,000 kids attending, and let's say 200 of them are bus kids, well, we're not going to have that much work. The other group of employees is our school security staff. And so with very limited number of students showing up during the online distancing, so what we plan to do is send, instead of only 2 security, 1 at each middle school and then 6 or 7 at the high school, then we're going to be splitting up the high school security and probably sending them off to the other schools to assist with the security and supervision and any other roles and duties as assigned at the school levels. Specifically, they could also be a paint crew. They could also help in maintenance. They could also help in doing some delivering of, home visit document. Not that they're going to visit people, but just delivering of documents that we need to have delivered to some parents' homes. So they will have an additional role other than security. And then, of course, we have the biggest population of all is the instructional support staff, which assists teachers. And so instructional support staff obviously will have a role within the school setting to assist and support the students and the teachers and take direction from teachers. The SPED services will continue to be provided, and those kids in special ed that are high need kids or are functional ed kids, we will be providing an opportunity for their parents to also send them to school every day of the week, and the IAs will be expected to work one-on-one with the kids like they always have, with the precautions that we will be having in place for CDC guidelines. And so even IAs IAs may take on the role of also some type of security. Let's say let's say Douglas High School ends up with 100 students that come to school every day. Obviously, we're not going to put 100 students in one location, but we've got to spread them out so that there's not more than 8 to 10 students in any given area. Now, if the space is, let's say, the cafeteria, and we're able to social distance within at least 6 to 10 feet apart, then maybe we can have, let's say, 20 kids in the cafeteria. So maybe an IA will be under that direct supervision of those students and assisting students with their online questions and online studying. So that's the other group of staff. And then you've got your school office staff. The school office staff is essential, to the functions. As I said, we're not closing school. School will still be open. Phone calls will be coming in. Parents will be calling in and excusing kids' absences, picking up documents, whatnot. We are going to limit the number of visitors that do come to the buildings, and even the parents. It's going to be a different modality. However, they are an essential employee to the functions of a school. And so all of these employees, very different from a certified staff person who doesn't clock in and out, these employees do. And they have strict duties to perform. And so if let's use the example of the school security. If a school security is unable to, for whatever reason, whether it's an underlying health condition, whether it is because they're in fear, then if they're not committed to do another job because they're still afraid and they don't want to come in, then that pretty leaves us with no option of not being able to pay them. And then what do you do in the case that if in that case, then I have to find somebody else to fulfill the role of a secretary, because you all know that the secretary is the right hand of the principal, and there's a lot of new information and new traffic that's going to be happening at schools this year related to COVID. So, yes, Mr. Bahrain, our classified support staff, whether you're at the school site or even, let's say, our 12-month support staff, who has already been working throughout this whole ordeal, is already fully working on site, and they all have to commit to being able to do another role in case their job right now is not being able for them to perform the duties, because we don't have the students that they normally work with.
Okay, well, the opportunity is there for
yes.
them, and we just hope that they avail themselves to it. We want to keep them all. We want to make sure we send that message that as long as they're willing to do something else, the board wants to keep them all, as well as the administration. And then part of what Mr. Ramos asked you a while ago regarding people, even in the governor's order, it mentions that in the absence of a teacher, that a paraprofessional or instructional aide
Yes.
could be on site, and they could oversee that instead of getting a substitute, as long
Exactly.
as they have the, and then you also mentioned extensively about security. What did the district decide to do with the contract with the city on that SRO?
So we met with Mr. Bobby Long, and because we are not going to have students at least first quarter, his recommendation, along with the discussion with Mr. Soto and myself, is that one, we don't want the SRO officer position to go away. I think it was very beneficial to DHS, but being the fact that right now we are not going to have that many kids, and even at the hybrid, so at least for first semester, we would postpone the need for an SRO and reevaluate at the end of the semester.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to, Mr. Soto's already communicating with the city to be able to prorate and notify them that at least for first quarter and second quarter, Mr. Long really felt strongly that even with the hybrid, if we're able to, because at this point we don't know if we're going to be able to go back hybrid second quarter. It is all of our intentions to do this. So, but with enough the security staff that's on site, we could reevaluate and really look at the need of the SRO even for that quarter.
And that's a savings
Yes.
to the M&O budget as well. Okay, members of the board, go ahead.
Just an observation. Okay, you meant quarter, because you said semester.
Yes, right now,
So the SRO would be limited for the first quarter, and then we're going to reevaluate.
we can do that. So Mr. Soto's going to notify them, and as I said, we don't need them first quarter, for sure. Second quarter, we will make a decision whether we go back hybrid, so we can assess then, but,
Good.
you know, it'll be an assessment as we go along.
And you
But
can-
we don't want to get rid of the SR. I think
No.
it
But
was
you-
very
you can
beneficial.
prorate the-
Yes.
prorate the salary.
Yes.
Okay, so for that first part, members of the board, of the opening of school and all of the provisions and the criteria that was mentioned here this morning, I'll entertain a motion based on the recommendation of the superintendent, and I'll let her read her recommendation again, knowing everything that was discussed here this morning and taking all of the ramifications of the discussion and the special discussion that took place regarding some of the options and things like that will be left up to you administratively. So if you would read your recommendation, and then I'll entertain a motion to adopt that as the motion.
Okay. My recommendation would be that we start school on August 17th online, and we allow a flexibility for our teachers and our teachers who are certified employees to provide information to their administrators whether they would prefer to stay at home and work or do their teaching remotely, from the site, with the provision that they need to attend their 8 days of training prior to the start of the school year, and would have to fulfill or fill out an internal document that will be created by HR to let us know of their decision.
Before we have a motion, we got to really be clear on this. I thought your discussion was, and based on what Dr. Gomez and Mr. Lindeman said, that you would like to have them all come, that the requirement be that they all come. However, if the administration felt, the building principal felt that there was a extenuating circumstance, that they could be allowed for a period of time to work at home. But that's not going to be a blank check to anybody say, my option is I want to work at home.
Yes.
Everybody reports.
Yes.
So let's make sure that's clear in the motion.
Okay.
Okay?
So the motion would be that everybody would report to work on site with the provision that they would have to communicate with their administrator if there are some circumstances that would prevent them, or they would prefer to work from home, and an internal document would have to be filled out.
Okay, and we'll include that with all of the rest of what you had said initially. Alma, is that confusing to you? We're going to combine both those comments of hers, okay? All right. We want to make sure we're absolutely clear and we're doing the right thing, and hopefully we're doing the right thing. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the statement and recommendation made by the superintendent as a motion. Will you make that motion?
I move, yes.
Dr. Gomez made the motion, so it's by Dr. Dr. Gomez, there is a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sabal, I believe, right? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Now, when we talk about, let's make sure that we're understanding, we're talking about all students, all activities in that motion, right?
Well, that motion was just
For the opening of school.
the opening of schools. And if I can have an opportunity to just discuss athletics a little bit, because I know we haven't really talked about it. I know there is a question out there whether athletics can take place, the decision that we mentioned last time. But Dr. Ed, he's got a question.
Mr. Brain,
Yeah, discussion.
I would wish that she would forego that and have it as a separate item, because I think it's very.
Yes, and I was just going to let her say it, and
Yes.
didn't want to cut her off. I was going to finish it.
Yes, and I think that needs to be a separate.
And then when you, well, it could be part of this one, but if Dr. Ed wants to separate it, I want to make sure that the posting is accurate. We talked about the reopening of schools, which meant reopening of
Of
all
everything.
students and all activities, so it would be all encompassing. So if you want to break that one part out and vote on that separately, we're perfectly within our purview to do that, all right? Okay, so we got a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Ramos?
Yes.
Mr. Lindemann?
Yes.
Mr. Sabal?
Yes.
Dr. Gomez?
Yes,
Mr. Bahrain?
Yes. Now, part of the same item is the reopening, and that's all encompassing of all the activities. Now, you want to discuss the athletic part of that? Because if we see anything any different, then we'll have a separate motion on that as well.
Okay. Obviously, athletics is a big part of Douglas High School, and only Douglas High School, and regulated by AIA. AIA has been providing guidance over the course of the summer since school closures, and so we know that our athletic program lost our athletes lost their program for the spring during the school closure, and at that point there was no school. Okay, what AIA is saying is that as long as schools are providing education via the online or the hybrid, then students could participate in athletics. They have pushed back the start of the athletic season as they've been, discussing and looking at mitigating circumstances and making decisions forth. The latest document that was provided by AIA is that they are they're still recommending and suggesting that schools can have their athletic programs as long as they follow the guidelines being provided by AIA. So they have been given very specific guidelines and changes to every sport that falls under the fall season sport, because what we're looking right now is fall season sports. We know that our athletes have not had, and I want to clarify, they have not had any type of face-to-face interaction over the summer. There was an approval to have our PPT program over the summer, but because of the circumstances, it never took place. So our athletes have not had any face-to-face contact with their coaches. Some of the coaches have made decisions to do some type of virtual training and activities and continue that kind of instruction via the athletic workouts. Not all coaches have done it, but some have. So in speaking with Mr. Walker and Mr. Ortega, who are available for a phone call if we need to discuss with Mr. Walker and Mr. Ortega, they are both recommending that we kind of wait. Athletic directors in the southern region are having a meeting, I believe, Wednesday. And these are all, it's Nogales and Rio Rico and all the surrounding southern Arizona school districts will have a meeting with their directors to discuss what potentially could happen to fall sports. And there is conversation about moving football to the spring. But of course, that I don't see that happening. Our spring sports already lost their season last time around, and I don't see that happening. So in speaking to them, they want to be able to have that opportunity to have this meeting with the Southern Region athletic directors and see, get input from all of them. But we know that AIA can give us all the guidelines and recommendations, but they have really left it up to school districts to make a call. Yes, do our athletes miss their sport? Absolutely. Do kids miss their schooling? Absolutely. And so again, the concern over the safety and welfare of the kids is still there. Can a certain sport happen and another sport not happen? So for example, is there more of a concern with football than there is with golf? Probably. There is more of that physical contact and closeness and lack of being able to stay 6 feet apart in football than there is with golf. And so they are asking us if we could just not make a decision on athletics today based on them not being able to gather information, and we have this meeting on Wednesday. AIA, I believe, did have a board meeting yesterday. Not sure what that board meeting result was, but I do have that the plan that they have in place right now, which is offering guidance and changes to each sport in order to possibly make it happen. So there's a lot to consider here, whether a sport is going to happen, what kind of social distancing guidelines we can implement, and how does traveling and competing affect the sport. So Mr. Walker had some good ideas yesterday, so we may want to, call him, have him call in, and the board can hear from Mr. Walker.
Well, before we do
Or
that,
if you want to.
Before we
Yeah,
do that,
discussion.
if the board were to wait on a decision, but
To
to
August
me,
4th.
when we talked about students in the student body, we're talking about our educational community, period. And we didn't exempt anybody. That's just
Yes.
officially and legally what we did. If they were to wait, there couldn't be any type of interaction that would contravene what we've already done in the original motion.
Exactly.
That would include them because it deals with starting a school. But they couldn't do anything because the AIA said they could do it. The AIA is more powerful than the governor. The governor said he left it up to us, and the AIA virtually saying they leave it up to us ultimately. But the point being, and then I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Gomez, is that if we were to say we'll hold off on a decision on athletics, there wouldn't be any type of interaction or face-to-face or anything until we did that, because that would really hold the district liable if anything were to happen. Dr. Gomez.
I feel, and I had discussed this with other people, that I didn't know what I wanted to do. If the schools are closed, then you say, well, that includes athletics. But the thing of it is that if there is a way that we can, then I think we should open it. But we should also find out, let's say, a football schedule. Let's find out how much of that schedule can be filled, because the other schools saying, no, we're not going to have football, and then maybe there's only 1 or 2 teams that was on our schedule that have. Now, I had heard that the school district where up there close to Oro Valley, I forget which one it is, I don't know if it's Marana or the other one, but they're going to start with their football program, where the little boy played. Anyway, it doesn't make any difference. But it's up there. So I know that there are some programs that are starting, but those programs are the ones that we are dealing with. So I would like that information.
Yes, there is a lot to take into consideration when it comes to athletics. And I feel that right now making a decision and saying, let's close the doors, just like we have an option for students to come in physically to our buildings to be able to get their learning. It's not the same thing, right? But they're still able to come into our buildings and the instruction will continue. And that's the whole thought of AIA. If students are passing their classes and doing their learning via online or hybrid, they can still participate with sports. So I agree with you. I think there's a lot more information that we can bring, that Mr. Walker and Mr. Ortega can bring to the board, because there's a lot of questions that I have as well. One of the discussions that I've had is that could potentially they've been playing around with is maybe looking at, let's say, golf being able to take place, cross country being able to take place, because students are running on their own. Potentially another sport could be swimming. So not so much as football because of the overwhelming concern. Then you've got volleyball too, which is an indoor sport. So I agree, Mr. Bahrain. Right now, like I said, there has been no physical contact, no weight room, no nothing taking place, and that will be my directive, that there is to be no contact, no activity until this board can really get all the information and make a decision. And so right now, I believe Mr. Ortega said that August 17th, I believe, has been designated by AIA as the beginning of, I believe, football. Phase one. And then they've pushed back some of the face-to-face competitions or practices like to September something. So they even have pushed back, but they haven't closed their doors, obviously, as this can get, athletics can get real ugly, and a lot of pressure can come to AIA. So if you, that would be my recommendation, to allow us to have more information for you, but that there is to be no activity, no face-to-face contact with athletes and coaches at this time until this board makes a decision.
Was that Mr. Walker's recommendation?
Yes.
Mr. Walker has an extensive background in sports, and of course, he's got the athletic director working under him. But if Mr. Walker wants us to hold off on that, and there won't be any interaction, there will be nothing at all until we make a decision on all of them, I'll go along with that. I'll go along with that. So we're just going to leave it at that then. There's no decision. So no decision has been made, because they're not exempted from anything. We didn't say, because they'll know before the 17th as well, right?
Yes.
So we'll just leave that in abeyance, and we'll leave, it's moot now, and until we hear from them. And we thank Mr. Walker and Mr. Ortega's input on that. And yours too, because that's a very, very important and let's face it, community interest. Yes. So we need to deal with that.
Mr.
All right.
President.
Go ahead, Dr.
Okay, because we're going to have a meeting next week, regular meeting, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're going to have a meeting on the 4th.
So that would be a good, and it
For them
would be
to
good
do
to
a
have
report.
Mr. Walker and
Mr. Ortega.
here.
Okay, we will.
or
Okay.
available.
Okay, item B, discussion information on new policy regulation, GBGB-R, staff personal security and safety, face coverings. This is also part of the governor's order. Ms. Samaniego.
Yes. Under the executive order, we were directed to create some policies for our face mask coverings. And so what we did and bring forth to you is an actual regulation. And so we found two areas, one for staff, and then under a policy for staff, and then under a policy for students, that would require us and allow us to embed that requirement. And so for staff, it reads, it would be GBGB-R, and again, it's a regulation under staff personal security and safety. And it would be, due to coronavirus pandemic, Douglas Unified School District will implement the following regulations until the Arizona Department of Health Service determines that face coverings, such as face masks or face shields, are no longer necessary or recommended to contain the spread of the virus. Staff will be required to wear a face covering until the Arizona Department of Health Service determines face coverings are no longer needed to prevent the spread of the virus. Staff will be required to wear a cloth face mask, especially when they can't stay a safe distance apart. Face coverings shall be the responsibility of the staff member. If unable to provide one, staff must notify their supervisor. Staff may use face shields as an alternative to a cloth face covering. Exceptions for face coverings are when staff can socially distance, when staff are outside in settings with distancing, when staff are allowed breaks to safely remove their face coverings off in a safe environment. School shall incorporate other restrictions and exceptions consistent with guidance from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Cloth face coverings should not be worn by children under the age of 2 or anyone who has trouble breathing, is unconscious, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove the mask without assistance. If a staff member fits into any of these categories, a staff member shall notify his or her supervisor. So that's the one for staff.
let's discuss that one, because there's been a lot of conversation regarding that one. I had a gentleman tell me that, and it's specifically because of the ambiguity there where it says, staff will be required to wear a face covering until at a safe distance. Well, who's going to determine what the safe distance? Here's what I was told, that there's a staff member who works in an office, and that some wear the mask, some don't. And that they don't want to get in any type of a debate with anybody, especially over a mask, and we know how controversial that is now anyway. Is this going to say that so that we take away that doubt or the argument that they wear a mask at all times? Because this says they only wear it unless they feel they're at a safe distance. I could be sitting next to you and take the mask off, and you say, I want you to have that mask on, and I say, I'm at a safe distance. Well, then we're going to have a debate, and we certainly want to avoid that at all costs. So is it going to be that they wear it all the time, or are they going to have the discretion to say, I think I'm at a safe distance from Dr. Gomez, and then you're going to have complaints, people aren't going to
Abide by them,
say
right.
this, directly to the coworker, but they'll call you and say, so-and-so isn't wearing a mask, and I don't feel comfortable, she's breathing all over me, she's got it down by her neck. And I've heard it also in classified with maintenance, that some of the maintenance guys don't wear them correctly, that they just have them on, but they have them around their neck. So isn't this amazing? We have to be involved in this, but we have to. We're charged with this responsibility. So
And
what
again,
is a safe distance?
yeah, the safe distance, of course, all with the CDC guidelines and information from, all this language came from the trust, obviously, and a lot of the information that came from the executive order. So we just implemented and to fit into our regulation. I have seen other documents where it says staff will be required to wear a mask at all times.
At all times.
And we can make that change.
Well, I want to ask the board, do we want to avoid that debate and grievances and arguments in the office about she's not wearing a mask, or I'm not going to ride in the truck with him because he's not wearing it? Do we want to get into that, or do we want to say that they should wear it at all times? Doctor?
No, I have no comment. I think that they should wear it all the time.
Wear it at all times. All right, members of the board, do you want to change that language where it says?
Exceptions, under the exceptions?
Okay. The
Yeah.
second paragraph.
Yeah, this is Mr. Lindeman. I would agree with wearing it all the time.
Okay, wear it at all times.
This is Mr. Ramos. I also agree, because you hit it right on the note. There's a lot of people that disagree about masks and other people that agree with the mask. And to avoid this, we just simply say at all times.
And also appropriately worn. I don't know if we should put
Yeah.
that in the policy too, but appropriately worn
it
means
could be.
covering the nose and the mouth.
Exactly.
So we want to add that too, Anna.
Okay. So what we'll say is, on the third little section there, staff will be required to wear a face mask at all times. And
You could say appropriately
Worn.
worn at all times.
And then say covering face and nose.
okay.
Covering face and nose. Covering mouth and nose.
Okay. And then we will take the exceptions for face coverings section out of the
Yes.
regulation.
Right.
Okay. Now, the only situation which I still think we need to leave that if anybody has trouble breathing,
Right.
unconscious, and or otherwise you have some kind of underlying condition, you need to let your
Yeah, and that's
And that's
on
in
a
there.
case-to-case
Yes,
basis. All right.
Yeah.
All right, so we have that.
Mr. President, I just wanted to mention, there's a lot of people that have trouble breathing with a mask because they have an underlying condition. But that's why you can wear a face shield. And
Yes.
they're very inexpensive
And it's-
online.
And it says it on here.
Right.
Face shield is.
Very good, thank you. That's a good comment there. All right, okay, entertain a motion to approve it with the corrections made to the language.
I move that we approve
Second.
it with the changes.
with the changes. Dr. Gomez made the motion, second by
Sabal.
Mr. Sabal. Any discussion? How hard is this going to be for you to enforce?
Well, I think administrators are going to have to be very vigilant, and then I've been saying it, and I'll say it again, it's going to take teamwork, and it's going to take collaboration and commitment from everybody to hold each other accountable.
Right. That's why I think it was important.
Administrators can't be policing
Right.
every teacher, every staff member that's on campus. I have heard, for example, maintenance, I have addressed it with Mr. Quinones,
Quinones.
but he's not out and policing them at every site and when they get in their
Right.
cars. So everybody has to be committed to keep themselves safe and assist in keeping others safe.
I just hope that it doesn't internally
Yeah.
cause a lot of problems in debate and disagreements with staff members, but it's a policy, and it's going to be enforced like any other policy. All right, do we have a motion on the floor?
Yeah, we didn't have the motion because it was a regulation.
Oh, that's right. It's a
So it's only for
regulation.
information only.
For
Okay.
information purposes only, that's right.
So we didn't have to do a motion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we made changes.
Well,
However you want.
it's a reg to the policy, right? It has to, in order to be a regulation, it has to be tied to some policy. It has the strength of the policy,
Yes.
because it's only taking part of the policy out for clarification. That's what regs do. So it's part of the policy, so it has the same strength, all right? Okay, so as long as we don't hear anything different from the board, we'll leave it that way. But just because the board didn't vote on it, we give tacit approval to it, so it has the strength of the policy. All right, item C, discussion information on new policy, regulation JLI-R, student safety face coverings.
So obviously, this is specifically for students, and I will read it and then see if there's any changes that you recommend. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, Douglas Unified School District will implement the following regulation until the Arizona Department of Health Service determines that face coverings such as face masks or face shields are no longer necessary or recommended to contain the spread of the virus. Students over the age of 2 will be required to wear a face mask covering until the Arizona Department of Health Service determines face coverings no longer needed to prevent the spread. Students will be required to wear a cloth face mask, especially when they can't stay a safe distance apart. Face coverings shall be the responsibility of the parent guardian. If unable to provide one, parent's guardian must notify the school. Students may use face shields as an alternative to a cloth face covering, especially for the lower primary grades pre-K to 2. There are some exceptions, again, when students can socially distance, when students are outside in the playground setting with distancing, when students are allowed breaks to safely remove their face covering off in a safe environment. Schools shall incorporate other restrictions and exceptions consistent with guidance from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Cloth face coverings should not be worn by children under the age of 2 or anyone who has trouble breathing, is unconscious, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove. If a student fits into any of these categories, the school principal needs to be notified by the parent guardian. So we could make the same changes on this. I know that the staff, everything we've read from CDC guidelines say, you know, as long as students can social distance themselves when they are independently working, when they're outside, they can remove their mask there. I don't think any teacher or administrator would agree that sometimes you need that break to just kind of remove it and breathe. But we can definitely make that change if the board recommends going along with the same language. Which says-
The only difference there is, who's going to make that, whether they're at a safe distance, the students or the teacher or the administrator, you know, because now you have another dimension added there. Kids, if kids say he's not wearing a mask, he's not, you know, we don't want kids
Yeah.
arguing now.
The feedback that I have received from my administrative team is, for the most part, I think the staff is asking if we could just require the mask to be on at all times, even if they are sitting down at their desk independently doing some work. And this is when we're back at school. Obviously, when they have lunch, you know, they're going to have to take it off and, let's say, to eat lunch. But anytime there is going to the restroom or going to their next class and all of that can be, it has to be on. So we can say students will be required to wear a mask at all times.
Doctor, what do you think about that?
No, I think so. You know, the thing that gets me is that you see kids walking on the street in pairs or in threes
Yeah,
and stuff like that, and they're not
and they're
wearing
not
masks.
wearing,
You know, but
well, they're in
I
school.
think it should be for them too.
So we don't have, and it just so that parents don't get, react to this immediately, there is a provision in there that there could exceptions could be made.
Yes, and then the
So-
face shield is also
So
another
they deal with the
option.
building principal on that,
Yes,
right?
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll make that same change that we did to the earlier one. Same language, okay?
Okay, and that's it, we don't need a motion, that's a reg, that's
Mm-hmm.
part of the policy already. The other thing, just for quick clarification from you, I've been informed that the trust is not going to cover districts for cases of COVID. And if there's any lawsuits against the district for anybody contacting COVID or anything associated with it. However, is there an update on that?
Yes,
That would
and
be
so-
severe. I mean, if you think of all the lawsuits we could get for even these two policies.
Yes, there is information that has been sent by the trust, and that obviously I sent it up to, after I received it, to our attorney. And just as of yesterday, Udall Shumway and I think a few other attorneys are now in collaboration with the trust, after the trust rolled out, this information. So what they have done and sent to school districts for us to use, because of that very reason, we've said it over and over that there are no guarantees, and we cannot guarantee that any staff or student is not going to be, sick with COVID once, school resumes. So what the trust has put together is a COVID-19 parental acknowledgement and disclosure letter that specifically gives guidance and information to the parents, and then there's a checklist that they have to sign off on and abide by and provide it to the school at every school. So this acknowledgement letter, for example, says each statement below should read and be initialed by either parent of the child or guardian. Signature by parent or guardian is required. So it's a checklist, and this is again provided by the trust and reviewed by our legal attorney.
How big is the checklist?
So the checklist has 11 things.
No, I was going to say read them, but no.
Yeah, I'll give you just quickly. One is that they understand that they're not going to be permitted freely onto campus, okay, back and forth. Two, that it's their responsibility to inform the school staff if there are members in their household who have been sick. That if there's any emergencies, they will have to step into the campus, that they have to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer and possibly be checked for a temperature check upon campus. 4 is that in order for their child to attend school, they will make sure that they have no symptoms, and then all the symptoms, that they will physically check them at home. 5, and that they will need to take their temperature at home. 6 is that they understand that over the course of the day, the school may need to take the child's temperature. 7 is that their child will be required to wash their hands. 8, that they understand their child must wear a face covering. 9, that they will immediately notify the site point of contact if they have become aware that their child has been in contact or positive with COVID. 10, that the district will follow the guideline, that they understand that the district will follow the CDC guidelines and any other appropriate measures. And 11, that they understand that while their child is present at school, they may be in contact with other children and employees who are also at risk of community exposure. I understand that no list of restrictions, guidelines, or practices will remove the risk of or exposure to COVID. I understand that the members of my family play a crucial role in keeping everyone at school safe. and the risk of exposure by following practices outlined. I, and then blah, blah, certify that I have read, understand, and agreed, and then they will need to provide child's name, date of birth. Okay, so that's one document. This is the parental
Did
disclosure.
that come from the attorney, or did it come from the carrier?
That came from specifically the trust. And
The carrier.
the attorneys are saying that, you know, they fully agree, they reviewed it, and are in agreement with this parental disclosure.
So they're saying that if they fill that out, every student, every parent fills that out, that the district is still going to be indemnified? That's what they're saying?
But that would be up to the insurance.
Yes, up to, see, and then the insurance is, the trust is already saying, right, that they're not going to be, if there's a lawsuit, if there is nothing because of this circumstance is not covered. What they're saying is that, okay, it says, while this form may seem long and detailed, the messages that you've heard before, you know, will monitor and all that. But it says, attached, please find a form. It is important that you read it carefully, sign it, and return it to us before the start of the school year. At a time when so much misinformation is circulating, we want you to clearly understand your responsibilities and our objectives when it comes to the safety of your child and our teachers, administrative, and staff. So it is something that even the attorneys are saying, we can have parents, we can send it out and have parents sign it.
You know, the only thing that ever bothers me about legal
Yeah.
matters, especially in dealing with students, is number one, parents can't sign away the legal rights of a child because when they turn 18, they can come back. Then the other thing is board members get sued. And of course, board members get sued when the district gets sued. But board members always get sued individually as well. Although the statute says that board members can't be sued if they're acting in good faith. And this is just for the board to know, because if you see that on the news or you hear it, it says that the trust isn't going to, you know, the first thing you think is, well, you know, we could get in a lawsuit. And board members, if you've ever been sued before, as a board member, you know that you get served, that you have to have an attorney answer it, that the wife always, or the husband always gets concerned about what does that do to us personally. And of course, that's why you have the trust attorneys, like the one that prepared those papers, that they represent us. But the statute says that if we act in good faith enforcing policies, that we can't be sued. However, it doesn't say anything about students. When they waive their rights, you know, they always, and there's case law that says, and I don't want to get too technical, but this is important, because if we have students that sue and say, well, no, you signed that waiver, and they come back and the court says, you can't sign a waiver, sign away the rights of a child, you know, they turn 18, they can come back and sue you. I just want to make sure that's all perfectly clear, and that we get more information regarding that, because that got my attention very, very quick this morning when I saw that the trust wasn't going to cover us. Somebody comes in and some student says that they had some, God forbid, a death because of COVID, and then they sue the district over it, and the trust says, we're not covering you for that. That's concerning. All right, so I personally, I think on behalf of the board, we'd like to have a much, much better, clear understanding of that. Because you say that comes from the
Yes, and then the other part of this is that waiver that you've heard about, that the trust has created. And it's the COVID-19 waiver release and assumption of risk form, very similar to the waiver that they had provided for athletics. You know, over the course of the summer, we were going to have practices. There was a waiver that they provided for us. So this is very, very similar, and this is on behalf of the parent. And I'm just going to read you the very last piece of this waiver that says, I further agree not to sue the release parties or to defend and indemnify the release parties for all claims, damages, losses, or expenses, including attorney fees, if a suit is filed concerning an injury, illness, or death to me, my child, or my household member as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's the last piece of that. So like I said, the trust rolled it out first, and they do have their attorneys, and now just yesterday, Udall Shumway then sent some more information that they've received a lot of questions from districts. I mean, as soon as I saw that, I did send it up to our attorney, and I wanted to, get some further guidance. And just yesterday, they sent something, yesterday in the afternoon regarding to, they are agreeing to they think the disclosure is good and can be used. And they are working alongside the attorneys from the trust to look at this waiver a little bit more closely. That was just yesterday.
And this would be a question for Mr. Walker and Mr. Ortega, but I think that when we clear and have the physicals and the waivers for athletics, that they sign that same type of
Yes.
waiver, that if they're
Exactly.
injured, that would be interesting to see that. But yet we still looking at a lawsuit of a recent tort, so to speak, of someone that's suing us because of an incident with a coach. So that's why I'm always very apprehensive about lawsuits and those kinds of things. And you get a better clarification
Yes.
for us, for the board, okay? All right.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Before we go. I'm a little confused. Okay, we get our insurance from the trust. Okay, so in that insurance, it insures the school district from liability. Am I right? Okay, now, in that situation of liability, do they have a board of directors section, which would be us?
Yes.
Okay, so that means that we are, in a way, covered. They're exempting the COVID-19, but we still have directors' insurance. So that's kind of good to know. And then the other thing is that, if we, like they used to tell us when we used to take classes, you really can't sign anything that gives away your rights.
Right.
No matter what you sign, you can't give away your rights. So, I don't know.
The question's interesting, and just to take a little bit further, the trust has insurance carriers.
Right.
And although they are the trust because all the districts contribute, and they do have their attorneys and all those things, but they also have to contract with insurance carriers.
Yes.
And the carriers might have told them, we're not covering anything you've got regarding COVID.
Yeah.
And that's what concerns me,
Yeah.
is that if the carrier says, it's like your health insurance, if they say, you're gonna have that surgery, we're not covering it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they're telling us now, they're telling the districts. That's why I think we need to get much better, a clearer explanation about that, because that could be very severe consequences if anything were to come from it. All right, enough on that. Thank you for that, Anna. Do we have anything else coming from the board?
Just as an example of when we were talking about something that was just sent this morning, or yesterday afternoon, actually, late afternoon, is speaking in terms of classified employees. They have sent us 2 documents for the mere purpose of what's in the executive order about paying employees as long as they are committed to work and remotely and on-site and doing their duties assigned. But they sent 2 acknowledgement forms, so it's an employee acknowledgement of responsibilities for maintenance of pay, one for exempt employees and one for non-exempt employees. So this is something in addition to that says, because we can have all the meetings in the world with our classified staff, but this, I think, they have found that to have something, a document that is being provided by school districts where we share it with our employees and they agree to the terms under the acknowledgement for. So this just came yesterday, just.
Well,
for
that
knowledge.
that is very good, because internally,
Yes.
administratively, absent having that, and I'm glad that you have
Yeah,
that, because that's drawn up by legal people, is that when you reassign somebody, like, say, a bus driver, and you say that you certainly notify them in writing, and they acknowledge it. I mean,
Yes.
you knew that anyway.
Yes.
And if they won't sign it, and they don't acknowledge it, and say, well, then, but again, let me just say this for the board, because if we discuss this a lot, then our classified people get confused. This district is not going to lay anybody off as long as you're willing to do the work that you're asked to do, period. I mean, that's how simple it is. If you accept the alternative that the administration's going to ask you, we hope you avail yourself to the opportunity. If you don't, then you've made that choice.
Mr. Berry, before we leave, part of the question that was asked of this employee in the public comments is whether staff can bring their employees to their work site during this COVID-19. And so, under the discussions that I've had with my leaders is, you all know that the school sites have that schools are open, 5 days a week, and all of our employees can even take their own children to the school sites. They are also, the flexibility of that is, for example, if I'm a parent, let's say I'm an employee at Sarah Marley, but my children go to Clawson Elementary. The same free on-site learning experience is going to take place at Sarah Marley. So I can take my own children to my work site where they're going to be supervised by somebody. It doesn't mean that they're going to be in my classroom per se, but there will be on-site learning for their children at the site that we work. And I think all the administrators are going to be accommodating, to that need. But as far as, can I take my child and bring him to my office every day? I think that's the question that some employees had asked their administrators, whether that would be a flexibility to be able to.
Well, that's a very, very good question.
Yes,
And it was one that was avoided 3 years ago, if you remember.
Yes.
The board had discussed a policy regarding bringing kids to school because of complaints that were being made by staff members that some employees were bringing their children to school and that they felt that they were unreasonably obligated to help and look after the child if the person walked out of the room or whatever. And then of course, the district needs to look at liability and the welfare of the child, the welfare of the other students. There's so many things, and there's policies everywhere regarding that. I would just end it by saying we didn't adopt the policy because, and it was very restrictive, and we didn't adopt it because we thought it would be in the best interest to leave it up to the individual building administrator, and hopefully they had the integrity and the background and knowledge to make a decision regarding whether you should let somebody bring 2 kids with them to school and sit in their classroom while they taught. The distraction, we talked about all of that. And we didn't do it. The policy is still a draft, and we have it. I'm not implying that we need to adopt it, but if, just for clarification now, because you don't want building principals having the problem, somebody walks in with their 3 kids and says, the board said the other day at the meeting, you could bring your kids to school.
Yes.
Now, we're going to end up being in the daycare business, and, God bless all our parents and everybody going through what they're going through, but we can't be in the daycare business and try to do all of the things that are going to be untraditional anyway.
On top
of that, have to do this. I can remember when coaches would take their kids in the bus on trips, out of town trips. The kids were running up and down the aisles, and everybody was. It's very, very difficult. It's a very difficult decision to make, and we're not going to even address that policy. I would do what you said you're going to do. I would leave it up to the administrators. If it's the kid can bring them to school, if the kid is learning in a learning situation, but just to bring them, you don't want to open up the district to liability and all of those other things that I just mentioned.
Exactly.
Because it talk about liability. Kid gets hurt in the gym, falls off the bleachers. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
By Dr. Gomez, second by Mr. Sabal. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjourn. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.